Hi, I'm Randy Altman with postPerspective. We're here at SMPTE 2019. To my left is film editor Roger Barton. So you have, throughout your career, how many films have you edited?
Probably north of 20, I'm sure.
Okay, so
but I, climbed the editorial ladder, started off as an assistant just when the industry was moving from film to digital. So it was a really good time for someone to come along who easily took to the digital experience of cutting movies. And because I took to that for some reason that I'm unaware of, I was sort of put on a fast track in terms of rising on the editorial assistant ladder, because people who knew the Avid and knew it well, just as that came around, were in very high demand. And so it allowed me to quickly sort of climb through the apprentice editor into assistant, and along the way I learned film. We carried film on a number of movies that I did. We would conform it and screen it on film, but I've never actually cut a movie on film.
Right.
So.
Well, it's interesting, your path from assistant editor to editor, because sometimes it's not easy for people, right? Were you given scenes to cut throughout the process, like as you moved?
My experience was mostly through observation. So I was very, very fortunate to work with many of the editors that I have, but primarily it was Mark Goldblatt who made a big difference in my career, because I had just finished Titanic and hopped on to Armageddon right off of Titanic. I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess. And Mark was cutting that, and I became his assistant. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was really a mentor-apprentice relationship with him. And it's unlike any experience you can really get in film, because he really wants his assistant in the room with him every single moment he's cutting. And so you're almost like just a voice in his head. He never turns around. He cuts, and he talks to you as he's cutting. What did you think about this? Why is that better? How come the other, And so you just need to have this constant dialogue with him, which means you need to be constantly engaged with not only him, but what he's doing, what he did 5 steps ago, and where he might be taking the cut now. So it was the best film school experience you could ever hope for. And I'm truly grateful, because we went on and did a number of other movies, and he's very well known to be incredibly generous of his time, of his experience, and passing that down to people. So ultimately, he gave me a chance to be an additional editor and a co-editor on a couple movies downstream. And so, in fact, there's one time we were cutting, because he cut for Michael Bay quite a bit, and we were cutting Bad Boys. He was the lead editor, and I was, I think at that point, like an additional editor. And I cut the sequence together, and he goes, after I screened it for him, he's like, "You're no longer my assistant, you're my competition."
Wow, that's pretty cool.
And that was like one of the more proud moments I've had, in my career. So
we're also here to talk about Evercast.
Yes.
Which, so the role of the editor, you're there, you're at, however the director wants to work. Sometimes they want you near set or on set, right?
Sure.
So talk a little bit about what Evercast is and why you started using it and why you're involved in it now.
Absolutely. So over the past 25 years, I've been sent to location all over the world for 3, 4, 6, 9 months at a time. And it's a hard lifestyle for all of us in production. And so finally, it was part of the reason that I ultimately became separated. And so while I was trying to navigate this new separation, I had a 12-year-old at home. Legendary and Warner Brothers approached me to cut Godzilla, which I really wanted to do, because it's a great thing to check off your bucket list if you're an editor, right?
Sure.
And so I really wanted to do the movie, but traveling to Atlanta for 4 months was just not an option, given my personal circumstance.
Yeah.
So as chance would have it, a friend of mine across the street found out who I was and said, "Hey, completely randomly, you should talk to my friends who are developing this new platform," which I had never heard of before. That led to a demo where I was sitting in my room in my house, contemplating whether or not I could do this movie. And they're now my co-founders, but the two people who developed this platform both live in Arizona. And so I was sitting on my couch at home, and it's a web-based platform that doesn't require any hardware to get set up.
Okay.
So they popped on. I basically logged into the webpage. They popped on and started streaming to me content from Arizona that looked amazing. And the latency was almost instantaneous, which is really important, of course, if you're going to be cutting remotely.
Sure.
When an editor says, stop there, it needs to stop, instead of like many of the other platforms that are not hardware-based, they keep running for like anywhere between 3 and 6 or 7 seconds afterwards. So that was really important. And just the whole layout, the thought that they put into this platform was quite dramatic and stunning for me. And so I really wanted to try it on Godzilla. I approached the studio and asked them if I could use it. And they have, of course, their own content security people who needed to vet the platform from a content security perspective. And after they kicked the tires, they tried to break in, they tried to break it for a number of weeks. They couldn't do it and said, okay, well, we'll let you use it provisionally on this movie just to kind of test it. Mm-hmm. And so that was one step or a hurdle I had to get through. The other hurdle was getting it in front of the director.
And the director of Godzilla was?
Michael Dougherty.
Okay.
And he was already on location in Atlanta. So shooting had already begun by the time I got it in front of him. So I was in my cutting room in Burbank. I was due to travel to Atlanta reluctantly in a few weeks, but I was counting on this working, right? So we connected on a weekend, and it was meant to be just a test where from my cutting room, I streamed right out of my Avid right to him, and he was on his laptop wirelessly. He was either in a coffee shop or in his hotel, whatever, because it doesn't really matter where he was. And what was intended to be a test ultimately became a 3-hour work session where I just started running cuts, and he started to give me notes, and I would just do the notes live with him as if he were literally sitting behind me. And keep in mind, this required no setup, basically I just within the platform sent him an email invite. Mm-hmm. He clicked on the invite, brought him to the webpage, he logged in, and then we were just live. That's how easy it is to connect.
And that's how you edited the entire film?
Well, during production, yes. So it meant I never had to go to Atlanta.
Yeah.
It kept me home the whole time. And the irony and what really got me involved was not just that personally it affected my life and improved my lifestyle. It's that I got way more face time with a director than I've ever had before, even when I was on location. Because whenever he was shooting and he was in between lighting setups or had a lunch break or on a weekend, any spontaneous moment he wanted to connect with me, he could just text me and say, hey, jump in the room. And we would just both jump in the room from different locations.
Right, different rooms.
And instantly he could get answers or I could get feedback. And so that resulted in a feedback loop that enabled me to get his feedback much earlier, which meant by the time he came back from shooting, he had already given me several rounds of notes for most of these sequences, which took all the anxiety away that a director usually has when they come back from shooting. They're like, what do I have? Does this guy know? Are we on the same page? He had seen everything, and it affected our visual effect turnover schedules. It really accelerated that because, I could cut things and we had a pretty aggressive schedule to get all those shots done in time. And we could just instantly connect, and he could look at my cut and say, well, I think we need to lengthen that shot or, whatever. So it really accelerated our workflow. And so it had such a big influence on me that after I finished that project, I took 9 months off of cutting and basically just advocated on behalf of the platform. So I took it into all of the studios that I already have relationships with, introduced it to them. And of course, every studio needs to, kick the tires and approve it from that content security perspective, because we have shows running on the platform now that have hundreds of millions of dollars of IP, running. So,
Oh my God, absolutely. Yeah, the
Yeah.
security
Yeah,
part
so
is insane.
it really is.
And then when you got back into editing, you just finished Michael Bay
Yeah.
film for Netflix? Is that
Yeah,
right?
so he directed a film for Netflix, which is kind of bizarre because he works on such a big canvas. And to think that most people will just watch it on a small screen, it's kind of a new paradigm, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's a completely bonkers movie that's super fun and really stylistic. And it was a great experience. I had never worked for Netflix before, and really enjoyed the experience. Happy to be looking, for my next gig. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So doing both, doing Evercast and still film editing.
I am doing both, and it's important to do both because I've always, to be honest, I mean, I'm in the academy, I'm a member of ACE, but I've always been looking for a way to have a positive influence on my peers and my community.
Yeah.
And after my experience of using this, I thought, what a great way. Of course, I'm part of the company now, but it's also really important for me to pass along what I've learned and experienced with this platform.
Yeah.
And if it can positively affect, the personal lives of my friends and colleagues who, just like I struggle with, traveling all around the world, if it helps them a little bit, then that would be the greatest credit I could ever have.
Well,
So,
that is
yeah.
very cool. Roger,
Yeah.
thank you for coming
Thank
by
you for
and
having
talking
me.
about Evercast
Yeah,
and
of
your
course.
process and everything.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Good to meet you.
Okay, you too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Roger Barton, film editor, Evercast.
Thank you.
Randy Altman, postPerspective, SMPTE 2019.